What do you make of the White House's response to the crisis? How did they act? What did they do?
Oh, yeah. You have to remember what's going on in the White House. They are now in a caretaking position of President Trump, who's obviously not well. I mean, if you just look at the way he acts and the impulsivity and his mannerisms and his impetuosity of his behavior. So they're caretaking him, and they're also trying to promulgate policy at the same time. But when you have a management structure like that, you end up with a lot of lack of coordination. And so you may recall this, but in our prior conversations, I said that many of my former administration friends, and some of which were senior level cabinet people, some of which who I frankly traveled to Afghanistan and Iraq with, have said to me that it's impossible to have lots of departmental or cabinet coordination with a man like President Trump because he doesn't manage well. And so you don't have this messaging going on that's necessary. And so people are very fearful. And so if you need help, if you're at Treasury and you need the Department of Justice, people are fearful to act with each other because they don't know if they're going to be on the right or wrong side of Donald Trump. And so if you recall 6-8 months ago, I was telling people if a crisis comes to this administration, they won't be able to handle the crisis because he's effectively paralyzed the executive branch. And I've actually written op-eds about this, which I can share with you. And because, classic management style requires you to delegate. Classic management style requires you to trust people that may be experts in certain fields.
Were you actually implying that the president is seriously ill?
Well, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I think he's unwell. Yes, I think he's got a combination of issues psychologically. You can't handle yourself the way he's handling himself. You see, it's interesting because you're asking me the question so are you saying the president's ill? You don't have to be a scientist or a psychiatrist to recognize when somebody's ill. Let me give you an example. If you're playing on the German soccer team, and I'm a spectator, and I watch you slide into somebody, and I can see from the videotape that your leg is broken, I don't have to be an orthopedic surgeon to say, oh my God, the guy got hurt on the soccer play, right? Mm-hmm. So, just look at him, and I think what happens is we're hyper-normalizing him. We're saying, okay, he is the successor of Abraham Lincoln and Dwight Eisenhower, and so therefore he must be normal. He must have characteristics of normality or statesmanship. He's in the Oval Office. But, so you're not going to say, well, wait a minute, he's unwell or there's something psychologically wrong with him. But the truth is there's something psychologically wrong with him. And you don't have to be a shrink or a psychiatrist to pick that up. You can just make that observation the same way you could see somebody breaking their leg in a soccer match. So he's obviously unwell. And so the big elephant in the room is people don't want to talk about it, and the fact that I'm stating it so truthfully and so declaratively is shocking to people because, it goes back to A Few Good Men and Jack Nicholson telling everybody, you say you want the truth, but you really don't want the truth. But yes, he's obviously unwell. And so that's complicating the issues around management. So he can't manage. You're there caretaking him. You're there trying to please him. You don't want to lose your job because you think there's levels of humiliation to that. Trust me, if I have experienced personally those levels of humiliation. So you're trying to avoid that public humiliation, and then you're also trying to handle the job. So that's why you've got this high level of dysfunctionality. So the White House totally botched and mishandled the COVID-19 crisis in the United States from all of those factors. If they were relying on the science and they were paying close attention to the intelligence reports and they were going to do the appropriate thing, they would have handled themselves more like the South Korean government. They would have said, okay, this is going to be a national crisis, explain to the American people exactly what it was, why it was going to be that way, and then forced a seismic cultural change. To be fair to the administration, the American people were probably not ready for that in the onset of the disease. So if we got the disease on January 21st, our first case was in Washington State, I don't think the American people, many of which don't travel around the world, don't understand these other cultures around the world, I don't think they would have accepted the protocols necessary to prevent further disease day one. So you have to cut President Trump objectively some slack for that. But the notion that he would have to wait till March 16th before taking a different direction, I think that probably cost a lot of lives. I think that probably, I mean, the New York Times said it was at least, through the Columbia University study, at least 36,000 people, in addition to what would have happened, died as a result of the slowness in terms of the deployment of policy to protect people. So look, it's an unmitigated disaster, but you have a culture war going on in the United States right now, and you have a racial tension that is bubbling up to the surface in the United States at the same time that you have a pandemic. And so this is why he has such strong support. I mean, what was Hitler's approval rating mid-April?
Yeah, we talked about it when we first met. You told me, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 39%.
39,
yeah. So, I mean, come on. This is what happens. When you have full-blown demagogues, there's a large group of the population wants to hang on to something that never existed. There's a nostalgia. There's an America of Norman Rockwell, this hagiography of America, but it never existed. That America had black and white water fountains. That America had black and white lunch counters. It's not the America today. It's not the America of 1968. This is a different America. And
can you explain? Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Can you explain the different, let's call it chapters or phases of the government's response? So the first case, January 21st, and then they wait until mid-March. Why? Did they want to ignore it? Did they wish it away?
Well, the government's response was slow because of President Trump. At the end of the day, the case study of that crisis management is a case study of the single man or the single woman theory of history, because what ends up happening is you are going to follow the dictum of whoever the leader is. And so the Italians have an expression that the fish stinks from the head down. And so what happened there was President Trump was getting the information, and I want to be fair to him. He's looking at this information. He's under the gun as it relates to the impeachment. He's got a robust and growing economy, and they're telling him he has to shut down the American economy in order to save American lives. And so to be fair to him, I think that's a pretty bitter pill to digest when you're up for re-election. And so I can understand some level of delay. I don't care if you are Barack Obama, Gandhi, the Buddha. If you're the American president, you're looking at the data and getting the information, you're like, okay, let me take a chill for a few minutes. So I can understand a 1, 2, possibly 3-week delay. But when you're getting irrefutable science and people are explaining to you the exponential factor of the growth, and that if you shut it down now, it's 25 to 50,000 people that could die. If you shut it down later, it's 100. If you shut it down later, it's 500,000. Then you have to be a responsible agent of the government and a good public servant and do the responsible thing. But he wasn't capable of doing that because of his personality. At the end of the day, he has spent 45 or 50 years curving reality to his reality. And it's been very, very successful for him. He's told not 10,000 lies, but 10 million lies. And it's been very, very successful for him. And so this is the reason why he's the modern LBJ. The skill set that he has for this moment is not the right skill set. So he can't get to the cameras and look at these cameras and say, fake science. You can yell fake news at a rally and point to CNN and cast dispersions, but you can't tell the American people that 2 + 2 = 7. They look at their hands and say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't compute. It equals 4. And then they say, okay, well, wait a minute, what are you telling me? And so what happened was he got out there and said it's just the flu. He got out there and said there's one person, it's not that big of a deal, we have it totally under control. He said it was 15 people going to 0, none of which was true, but all of which was pursuant to his deflection and reality distortion playbook, where he was going to try to will a reality that was very different from the reality. And so he's been able to do that politically, he's been able to do that commercially in business, but you can't do it with scientific fact. And so this is why he got steamrolled by the crisis. And so this is the reason why the delay took place, because he was trying to will something to be true that in fact wasn't true, and he wasn't willing to listen to the scientists about what was going on. And so it actually took a group of his friends over the weekend, Wall Street executives and private equity people that met with him over the weekend of March 14th and 15th and said, hey, you're going to have a calamity beyond belief. You're going to have 1 million people dead, and you're going to have a global depression if you don't act. And so then on that Monday, he reversed course.
I've met Donald Trump only twice. Once interviewed him long time ago, and he wanted to be liked by the media, even by me. He didn't know me. Some German newspaper guy was writing for Der Spiegel back then, and he wanted to be liked by Der Spiegel. Why does he want the press to be his enemy and the enemy of the people? What's to gain is my question.
So, I mean, you have to understand his history with the press to understand where he is today. And so his history with the press is that he felt that he was a good showman and that he was a good communicator. And I will stipulate that he is, because he made it to the American presidency. And so what he figured out was through his showmanship and through his articulation of who he was with the press and his brand, he was able to exponentially grow his brand of luxury and sort of that refinement that he was looking for, that fine touch, as he used to say. And so the press and him, in his mind, for 40 plus years, he had a very good relationship. He could go on Howard Stern, he could go on The View, he could be on Larry King's show, he could be interviewed by Der Spiegel, and he was always trying to use his personal charm and his affect, classic what narcissists will do, to draw you in to get you to like them. But they always have an overbite, narcissists. Mm-hmm. See, like people that are not narcissists, they actually don't give a shit, okay? They're like, okay, you can like me, great. If you don't like me, let's all move on. But a narcissist wants to seduce you, wants to bring you into the Venus flytrap of their personality. And so that's why he had that relationship going on with the press. But when he ran for office, in the beginning, he was masterful at manipulating the press. The press thought he was a clown show and a freak show, and it was a spectacle, and he's a smash-mouth talker. He's sort of like the Howard Stern of presidents, right? He's a smash-mouth talker, and so that was very interesting to the press. So they were running him on cable news. They were running the rallies, and he was saying some things about politicians and politics that seemed true, and so people enjoyed it. They enjoyed the raconteur nature of it. And then when he started becoming a serious candidate, which tells you, by the way, the seismic problems that we have in the country, tells you how much populism there is in the country, how much anger there is about what's going on in our society between the haves and the have-nots. As he starts to transition into a serious candidate, the press turns on him. He doesn't like that because he wants them to like him. So now the press has turned on him, and he has now figured out that his brand as a politician is a non-elitist brand. His brand is a non-intellectual brand. His brand is to go for a demographic that wouldn't like the press, and that wouldn't like the notion that the press or the elites are looking down on them. I mean, the reason why I think I have a good understanding of this is I grew up in a blue-collar family. I lived in a neighborhood that would vote for Donald Trump, okay? And I understand it from that perspective. And then, of course, I ended up going to Harvard Law School, so I understand it from the other perspective as well. And so that's what went on. And so he figured out that he could use that as a device to split the country and become the red tribal leader of the country. And then he looked at the map. He recognized that he's not going to win the population because the population, you know, is coastal and the population is aggregated around the cities. And what do you find in cities? People are more open-minded in cities because they are experience a lot more cultural diversity, and they recognize that people that look differently than them are probably more similar to them than they are not. So now he's going after people that don't live in the cities. And so that's an anti-elitist move. And then Steve Bannon comes in, and Steve Bannon understands Trumpism better than Donald Trump, and they declare the press the enemy of the people. And that's the evolution of that. So now I'm sitting in the Oval Office. It's July 21st, 2017. He turns to me, and he says, Anthony, what happened? I mean, I used to have a great relationship with the press, and for 45 years I had a great relationship. But what happened? I said, what do you mean what happened? I said, you declared war on them. You told them that they're the enemy of the people. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to ante up. I said, I can help you diffuse this, okay? And he said, okay, well, you do the press conference today. So I went down to the press room and I did the press conference. And the first group I called on was CNN. I saw Sarah Murray sitting there to my left, and I was looking for Jim Acosta because I wanted to diffuse what was going on. And so I called on her. The CNN hadn't been called on in the Brady press room for 3 months. And I was trying to send her a message that we're going to bridge that gap. And then, of course, I got exploded out of there like an Austin Powers villain, so I didn't get a chance to help him. But, look, I mean, the guy's nuts. And so somebody like me, there's no way you can help him because, he has to be the spectacle. He has to be the person where the spotlights and the cameras are on him. There can be no other stars on the Trump stage. And so guys like Pompeo and Mnuchin understand that, and that's how they've been able to survive.